My name is Helen Brooks. I am the groom's mother. Helen handed the cream-colored invitation across the reception desk. Claire checked the computer twice, then avoided looking into her eyes. I am sorry. Your name is not on the guest list. Beyond the gates of the oceanfront estate in Newport, the guests were already seated beneath long arrangements of white flowers. One chair in the front row on the groom's side remained empty, but security had been ordered not to allow Helen through the gate. The mother who had waited years for her son's wedding had suddenly become the only person forbidden from witnessing it. A woman passing nearby dropped her shawl onto the stone walkway. Although her throat tightened with emotion, Helen still bent down, picked it up, brushed away the dirt, and returned it. "Thank you," the guest said, unaware that the woman helping her was being kept outside her own son's wedding. Claire's phone rang. After a brief conversation with Victoria, she told Helen that she could wait in the employee area until further instructions were provided. Several hours earlier, Helen had prepared for the wedding inside her small apartment in Providence. She wore a dark blue dress that she had altered herself from an older gown, carefully adjusting every seam before placing a blue handkerchief inside her purse. It had been made from the shirt Daniel wore on his first day of college. A coworker from the laundry shop brought her a jewelry box. "At least choose something for this special day." Helen accepted only a small pair of earrings. "I will return them immediately after the wedding." She traveled to Newport by bus and train because she did not want Daniel to send a car while he was busy preparing for the ceremony. From the station, Helen walked the final distance to the estate. Near the entrance, a young server was panicking because a button had come loose from her uniform. Helen removed a needle and thread from her purse and quickly sewed it back into place. "Do not let one button frighten you today," she said with a smile. During the train ride, Helen had kept a small gift box safely on her lap so it would not be damaged. There was nothing expensive inside, only the blue handkerchief and an old photograph of Daniel. When the rooftops of Newport appeared beside the ocean, Helen adjusted the borrowed earrings and reminded herself that all she needed was the chance to see her son happy. Inside the bridal preparation room, Emma looked at the clock. "Daniel's mother still has not arrived? I reserved a seat for her in the front row." Victoria adjusted her daughter's veil. "She has a headache and does not want to appear in front of a large crowd." In another hallway, Daniel took out his phone to call his mother. Victoria immediately asked an assistant to hold the groom's phone while he completed a series of family photographs. The message Helen had sent, "I am at the gate," was never delivered to him. Inside the employee area, Claire showed Helen the updated guest list. The official invitation was still in Helen's hand, but the name Helen Brooks had disappeared from the screen. An older seating chart appeared briefly before Claire closed the window. Helen's name had originally been placed in the front row. Helen did not shout for Daniel. The ceremony music had already begun, and she was afraid that her son's wedding would become an argument. "I only need to see my son for 1 minute," Helen said. "If there has been a mistake, Daniel will explain it." Victoria appeared with a cold but polite expression. She led Helen into a small sitting room behind the hallway so the guests would not see her. Helen looked through the window toward the empty chair facing the ceremony. "Was that chair meant for me?" "It will be given to one of the family's financial supporters," Victoria replied. Helen took a deep breath. "I do not need to sit in the front row. I can sit in the back and stay out of every photograph. I only want to watch Daniel make his vows." Victoria could have stopped there, but she shook her head. "Daniel is entering a new world. He does not want you to embarrass him." Helen froze. "Did Daniel say that?" He agreed that you should not attend the ceremony. He simply did not have the courage to tell you himself. Helen did not fully believe her. Daniel had never acted ashamed of his mother, but her phone remained unanswered, and her son was only a few doors away without coming to find her. The silence began to weaken the trust she had carried for 32 years. Helen remembered Daniel promising that he would personally escort her to the first seat in the front row. Yet surrounded by unfamiliar wealth and doors that kept closing in front of her, she began to wonder whether that promise belonged to a life her son had already left behind. Victoria opened her purse and removed a bank envelope she had prepared in advance. Inside was a check for $100,000, bearing Victoria's signature and the words, "Family Settlement." "This money is enough for you to live comfortably," Victoria said. "Leave before Daniel sees you. After the wedding, you should also keep your distance. He needs to focus on his new family." Helen looked at the amount, which could cover many years of rent, then looked down at her own calloused hands. Victoria was not merely purchasing an empty chair. She wanted to purchase Helen's disappearance from her son's life. Helen pushed the check back across the table. "I may be poor, but I will not sell my right to love my son." Victoria did not take the envelope. She left it on the table and walked out of the room, leaving Helen alone with the ceremony music echoing through the hallway. Helen removed a sheet of writing paper from her purse, placed the blue handkerchief beside it, and looked toward the place where Daniel was waiting. She picked up the pen, her hand trembling slightly. "Dear Emma," she wrote, "if you are reading this letter, I may have already left the wedding." Helen's pen stopped moving. Beyond the window, the Newport ocean rolled beneath a gray sky, while the sound of string instruments drifted in from the ceremony as though it belonged to another world. She wiped a drop of water from the paper and continued writing. "I am sorry that I left. Please do not blame Daniel. He is a good son. Perhaps today he was simply too embarrassed to tell me himself that he did not want me there." When she reached those words, Helen's hand began to tremble. She picked up the check for $100,000 from the table. Without signing the acknowledgement section, she folded it and placed it inside the envelope. Then she removed the deed showing the sale of her house and a receipt from the EB Education Fund from her old cloth bag. She did not want recognition for what she had done. She only wanted to make sure Emma did not believe that she had accepted money to disappear. Daniel still believes that he received a full scholarship. The truth is that the scholarship covered only basic tuition during his first 2 years. After Edward died, I sold our family home, moved into a smaller apartment, and placed the remaining money into an education fund named after his father, Edward Brooks. During Daniel's college years, Helen worked night shifts to pay the remaining tuition, books, and living expenses. She had hidden everything because she knew Daniel would have left school and returned home if he had seen how exhausted she was. I am not telling you this so that he will feel grateful. If you tell Daniel, please do not allow him to live with the burden of believing he owes me. Tell him only that I never regretted it. The door opened quietly. Richard stepped inside and stopped when he saw Helen's red eyes and the documents on the table. Helen folded the letter, but she did not hide her tears. "Richard, I need only one honest answer. Did Daniel ask me to leave?" Richard looked toward the hallway. A single word could have stopped the lie, but he only lowered his voice. "There is too much pressure today. It would be better if you did not create an uncomfortable scene." Helen looked at him for a long time. His silence hurt more than a direct confirmation. "I understand. She sealed the envelope, called over a passing server, and placed it directly into his hands. "Please give this to Emma." Only to her. Helen held the cloth bag against her chest and walked along the oceanfront path toward the gate. The wind lifted the hem of her old blue dress, but she kept her back straight. The server had not reached the end of the hallway when Victoria appeared. "What are you carrying?" "A letter for the bride, ma'am." Victoria called Claire over. "Until the ceremony is finished, every letter addressed to Emma must be held. No exceptions." Claire did not open the envelope, but through the edge that had not been completely sealed, she recognized Victoria's check. This was no longer a dispute over a seat. A mother had been offered money to disappear from her son's life. Claire looked up as though she wanted to speak, but Victoria gave her a warning stare. Afraid of losing the contract, Claire placed the envelope inside a file. For the second time that day, she knew she was doing something wrong and obeyed anyway. Several minutes later, Sarah went looking for a safety pin for the wedding dress. Through the partially open door of the employee area, she saw Claire hiding an envelope with Emma's name on it. When Claire was called away, Sarah entered, took the letter, and carried it directly to the bridal room. Victoria was adjusting her daughter's veil. "Helen chose to go home because she was not feeling well. Do not allow it to affect your wedding day." At that moment, Sarah placed the envelope in Emma's hand. "I believe you need to read this immediately." Emma recognized Helen's handwriting. She looked at her mother. Why was Daniel's mother's letter being held in the employee area? "Read it after the ceremony," Victoria replied. "The guests are waiting." Emma removed her mother's hand from the veil. "No. If she wrote this before leaving, I will read it before I walk outside." At the ceremony, Daniel stood beneath the arch of white flowers, repeatedly looking at the empty chair in the front row. "Where is my mother?" he asked Richard. "She was not feeling well, so she went home." Daniel began to turn away, but then he saw Helen's old cloth bag beside the reception table. It still had the repair he had sewn for her when he was 16 years old. "My mother was here." His voice changed immediately. "Why did you say she never arrived?" Inside the bridal room, Emma read the opening lines. The check fell onto her dress, followed by the house sale document and the receipt from the EB Education Fund. She read the name Edward Brooks again, her lips tightening. Emma turned toward Claire without raising her voice. "Who ordered you to remove Helen's name?" Claire's face became pale. After a long pause, she opened her phone and showed Emma Victoria's messages along with the original seating chart. In the first row, the name still appeared clearly. Helen Brooks, mother of the groom. "Victoria ordered me to change the guest list, stop Helen at the gate, and hold every letter she tried to send," Claire admitted. "I knew it was wrong. I was afraid." The music outside changed to the bridal entrance piece. The officiant announced that it was time to begin. "Stop the music," Emma said. Victoria stepped in front of the door. "Do you understand how many investors and reporters are waiting outside? Stopping the ceremony now will become a public scandal." Emma held the letter, the check, and the seating chart. There was no hesitation left in her eyes. "The scandal is not that the truth will be revealed, Mother. The scandal is what was done." The ceremony doors opened. Hundreds of guests stood at once, but Emma did not walk toward Daniel. She stopped at the beginning of the aisle, looked at the empty chair in the front row, and asked the officiant to hand her the microphone. The music stopped completely. Daniel looked at the envelope in her hand, while Victoria stood frozen behind her. Emma opened the letter in front of hundreds of watching guests. Before we exchange our vows, everyone needs to know why the groom's mother is standing outside these gates. The ocean wind moved through the silent ceremony. Daniel recognized the handwriting in Emma's hands. "Where's my mother?" Emma read Helen's apology for leaving. Helen asked her to take care of Daniel and not blame him for being ashamed of his poor mother. "No," Daniel interrupted, his voice breaking. "I never asked her to leave. I did not know her name had been removed." Emma continued writing. After her husband died, Helen had sold their house, moved into a small apartment, and worked several jobs to pay Daniel's tuition, books, and living expenses. Daniel stood frozen when the property sale document was revealed. He had always believed that his mother rented out the old house and moved only so she could live closer to the laundry shop. Emma held up the receipt. "The Edward Brooks Education Fund was named after your father. Every payment you were told came from an additional scholarship actually came from your mother." The color disappeared from Daniel's face. Emma removed the check for $100,000 from the envelope and looked directly at Victoria. "You tried to purchase the disappearance of the woman who sacrificed her entire life so the man I love could stand here today?" Victoria shook her head. "It was only financial assistance. I did not force anyone." Claire stepped away from the employee seating area and presented the messages ordering her to remove Helen's name, keep her outside the gates, and stop every letter addressed to Emma. The original seating chart showed that Emma herself had reserved the first chair for the groom's mother. "I obeyed because I was afraid of losing the contract," Claire said. "I am sorry. I do not expect an apology to erase my responsibility." Emma turned toward Richard. "Did you hear that conversation?" In front of the cameras, Richard lowered his head. "Yes. Victoria said Helen had to disappear from Daniel's life. I heard her and did nothing to stop it. My silence allowed the lie to continue." Victoria struggled to keep her voice calm. "I was only protecting your future from class differences and public criticism." "The person who damaged this family's honor was not Helen," Emma replied. "It was the person who believed money gave her the right to decide who deserved to be a mother." Daniel removed the flower from his jacket and ran out of the ceremony. Outside the gates, Helen was sitting beneath a bus shelter with the blue handkerchief resting in her lap. When she saw her son running toward her, she stood. "I will leave now. You do not need to—" Daniel wrapped his arms around her. "I have never been ashamed of you. I am sorry that I did not see what you were going through." Helen placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not every mistake belongs to Victoria. I hid too much from you, and that meant you did not know the truth well enough to protect me." Daniel asked her to return, but Helen looked toward the ceremony and hesitated. "I do not want your wedding to become an act of revenge." Emma walked to the gates herself, her wedding dress moving across the stone path. She took Helen's hand and called her Mother for the first time. "Mother, this wedding will not continue without you." The employees who had stopped Helen now opened the gates themselves. She walked between Daniel and Emma. The guests stood, not to applaud her out of pity, but to quietly make room for her. Daniel escorted his mother to the front row. He removed the sponsor's name from the empty chair and restored the original sign. Mother of the groom, Helen Brooks. Helen gently touched her name. That small piece of paper returned what money had tried to take from her: the right to belong. Emma announced that the wedding would continue only after a public apology. Victoria offered several vague statements about unfortunate misunderstandings, but Emma refused to accept them. Finally, Victoria admitted the truth. "I lied to Helen and Daniel. I removed her name from the guest list and used money to pressure her into leaving." Helen looked at her calmly. "I accept your apology, but forgiveness does not mean everything immediately returns to normal. You must respect the boundaries Daniel and Emma establish." Helen did not demand that Victoria be removed. "I do not want any mother to stand outside her child's wedding the way I just did." Victoria was allowed to remain as a guest, but she no longer had the authority to control the ceremony or speak on behalf of the family. When Daniel and Emma exchanged their vows, Helen sat in the first chair. They promised never to use silence as a way to preserve peace when someone they loved was being harmed. At the reception, Daniel thanked his mother for giving him the opportunity to receive an education. He did not reveal her private sacrifices or turn her into a symbol of pity. 6 months later, the unused portion of the wedding budget became the Edward and Helen Brooks Fund, which helped working parents pay for their children's education. Richard contributed as part of accepting responsibility, then resigned from his position as a joint manager of the family fund. Claire established a new rule, requiring every change involving a close relative of the bride or groom to be confirmed directly by the couple. Victoria began family counseling. Their relationship could not immediately return to normal, but she came to understand that a second chance had to be earned through actions. At the first scholarship ceremony, Helen appeared in the same altered blue dress. Daniel and Emma stood beside her. The old handkerchief was displayed inside a glass frame with the words, "Love is not a debt. It is an opportunity passed forward." Helen did not return to the ceremony because her dress had become more elegant. She returned because the people inside finally understood that no family could purchase a mother's dignity. Forgiveness does not erase responsibility. It only opens a path for people to repair the harm they caused through better choices. If you were Helen, would you give Victoria a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, stay with Stewart Stories, where we tell stories of love, hope, and justice.